to Generations, a show for seniors, people who know seniors, or people who will someday become seniors. I'm David Lepaco. I'll be your host for this episode of Generations, and I'm going to introduce our co-host in just a moment. But first, to talk about the theme of today's program, we're interested in both friends and family. And that could be family who have become closer friends than we could have imagined, or friends who are so close to you now that they feel like family, or some combination thereof. And so, as I introduce the co hosts, I'm hoping they would talk about one such person who is either part of their life or wishes was part of their life. And why don't we start with the person, let's see who has the nicest hat in the room. And I think that would be Candy Pettiford. So, how are you? And talk about your friend that you can, that's relevant to this kind
Oh,
of a discussion.
that's a setup, David, because I have so many friends. I was a flight attendant for the airlines. So, wow, that I have a lot of friends that I probably will talk about, and maybe some family too.
Okay, thank you. Nadia Giordana is with us today. Nadia, how are you? And any friends that come to your mind?
I'm doing well, and yes, this is a subject near and dear to my heart. I do have close friends, a godson that I'll tell the story a little later in the program, who is to this day still a close family member and still introduces me as his godmother wherever we end up on Zoom or someplace else.
Okay, great. Next, we have Mike Rosberg, who is certainly a friend of mine from a long time ago, and we continue to be friends. Tell us a little about your friend orientation these days.
Well, in this particular case, I went to Candy Pettiford's uh, birthday celebration last year, and we all got up and said something. And one of the things I said was, I feel almost like I'm a friend of the entire Pettiford family because I've gotten to know Candy, her two daughters, and two of her grandchildren.
Mhm.
And I think very highly of all of them. And it's just a treasure to know that family.
Oh, how sweet. Finally, we have Rashida Jenkins. And Rashida, anything come to mind regarding friends or family as we start the program?
Most definitely, yes. I have had so many different careers from construction worker to school bus driver. And so over the years, I've collected many friends. So definitely look forward to talking about that.
Okay. Well, I think there's been a lot of discussion about friends for people in general and for senior citizens specifically. And there seems to be a connection between friendship and mental health, friendship and physical health, and just friendship and happiness. And I think Candy was going to kind of get us going on this one and tell her own story. And so, Candy, I'll turn it over to you and tell us what
Right.
your experience is with friends.
Well, my experience with friends is I think you have to be a kind person yourself and want friends. Because some people are, you know, sometime you're like, can they stay consistent as a friend? So one day they're you may find they're grouchy. They say they're fine. Like those kind of friends I try to stay away from. But I do have one particular friend, and she is just awesome. She has a wonderful husband, and they live in Roseville, Minnesota. And she just, the kind of friend that I had give you an instant. I had a phone purse, and it looked terrible. She stopped right then, and she made me two new phone purses and said, "I just didn't think it was looking good on you, so I will help you." So that's kind of friends I have like that. I mean, I just see things that I need and are helpful with me. So great people like that. But first, be a good friend. That's what I would say. Be a good friend.
Yes.
Some of that also involves taking some risks. I was just
Mhm.
reading something the other day about the 10 things that people who are older most regret. And one of them is that they didn't make more friends and they didn't take more risks. And so you really have to reach out to people. It's not just
True.
automatically going to happen. But
Yeah.
even this week, I have a Facebook friend who I went to college with over 50 years ago, and we corresponded through Facebook a little bit in the past few days. And I said, well, let's have lunch sometime. And she said, yes, with an exclamation point. And I think most people are really yearning for that sort of thing, but somebody has to take the first step. And often people are reluctant to do that. They don't want to get in people's way, or they want to invade their life or their privacy. But the reality is, I think we all are all yearning to have those kinds of connections. Any other stories about personal connections and friendships? Nadia?
Yeah, I'll expand on that story I had earlier, picking up on what Candy said about you have to want to have friends, closer friends. And David, what you said, and that somebody has to take the first step. And
Mhm.
I'll talk about a story that has gone now over, gosh, it's got to be getting close to 40 years. Uh, when my daughter was a kid, she had a group of friends, and one of those friends of hers was a young African American 14-year-old who was just the light of our lives. As that when that group of kids came over to the house, Sherman, that's his name, Sherman, was everybody's friend. He just had that kind of personality. And he had a perfectly wonderful family and a perfectly good mom, but he kind of looked at me in a mother type role, which would make sense considering the age difference. And at that time, he wanted to put a label on our relationship that gave it a little bit more importance. And he asked me to be his godmother.
Nice.
And I agreed. And this isn't the same as the official godmother stuff, because like I said, he had probably maybe even had an actual godmother. No, I don't think so. But anyway, he asked me to do that. And I said, yes, absolutely, I'll be your godmother. And fast forward 30, 40 years, he grew up, we grew apart and didn't see each other for over 30 years, but have reconnected recently. He's over 50, he's a pastor, and he still introduces me as his godmother.
Nice. That's nice.
I keep hearing violins playing. Any other happy stories? Rashida or Mike? Anything come to mind?
Well, I'll mention a gentleman that I met. He moved in about 4 doors down from me when I was about 10, 12, something like that. And so I got to know him both as a playground friend, and we went to the same school. And he has always been a very sociable person, likes people. And about a year ago, his wife passed away, and his children live out of state. So he was like on his own. And at that point, he certainly sought the friendship of myself, and I'm sure other friends of his. And however, he did then move into a senior facility and had people all around him. And so that very much helped him to get through this period of time, because he had lots of people around and he could make new friends. So that is, it was a difficult situation, but it is turning out well for him. And I'm glad for that.
Well, really, one of the potential benefits of being a senior citizen is you're not in the middle of parenthood. And I know when our two kids were teenagers, it was all we could do to just get them to gymnastics and dance and band concerts, take care of their needs and work full time to make sure that we could pay for it all. And after that, the idea that you can have a little more time to develop those kinds of friendships is a real luxury. And I think sometimes seniors don't fully appreciate the freedom that they have to do that.
Well, Dave, let me ask you a quick question. Have you ever become friends with one of your students at Augsburg?
Well, sure. I probably have had, I haven't actually tallied it up, but easily 5,000 students, maybe 10,000. I don't know. So there's always somebody. As a matter of fact, There's somebody who was a student of mine about 15 years ago who sent me a note a couple weeks ago, and she usually checks in about once a year, and she wants to have lunch this week. And so I'm trying to find a time for that to happen. But there are a certain number of those people, maybe realistically 10 or 12, who I sort of stay in touch with. But there are a lot of others who are either Facebook friends or people I might hear every once in a while from. And so it's been a nice little network of people who connect me to a lot of different periods of time in my life. And I've tried to do the same thing. I think I mentioned on this program a while back that I had breakfast a few months ago with my 7th grade social studies teacher. And so I found those kinds of connections to be very meaningful. And the fact that students haven't forgotten me, I mean, that's all you've got for as an educator. You don't have tons of money. You don't have buildings with your name on them, but you do have this whole group of people who are out there in the world, and some of whom might have actually remembered what they profited from by being in that class. And so that's very meaningful to me.
Mm.
And Rashida, don't you have a godfather who you particularly like and have known for quite a while?
You know, it's something that you say that, Mike, because when Candy mentioned her friend from years past, those are actually my godparents. And so the connection has been there since I can remember. My earliest memories are being at their house, playing with their dog, and their children being some of my closest friends growing up. And so I think it's a blessing to have relationship that you can count on throughout the years. There was an article that was shared about how family comes and goes, you know, sometimes, but friends within as you age seem to be more of a confidant and something that you can depend upon. And so I really value that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do think that for seniors, oftentimes they end up separated from family across the country.
Yes.
For whatever, whether that's by distance or maybe less fortunately estrangement. But for seniors like that, having some closer friends near where they are and where they live and in their inner circle gets to be more important as time goes by.
I guess what I want to know is, has anybody noticed that COVID kind of brought in a little snafu and kind of, I've heard more families kind of who were getting along fine, you know, and then friendships kind of broke apart. I'm wondering, does anybody else beside me see that COVID kind of played a part of busting up some of that?
And also it brought in some, it created space for new friendships. But yeah, I've noticed some of that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're still looking at all the ripple effects of that pandemic all the way across our society, from use of office space to our economy, certainly in education, we've looked at that, and also even personal relationships. And I hate to mention this in this context, but one reality is that not everyone in my extended family sees the COVID pandemic period in the same way, that the political overlay to it. Some people who took it very seriously and listened to every public health suggestion that was offered by the government, and other people who were deeply suspicious of the government, thinking that this was not a real threat. And so that, unfortunately, that rift in our culture that we've been experiencing in so many different ways also played itself out during COVID. And so you would think this would be a time for us to all unite behind a common enemy, this disease. But it didn't quite work out that way. It did push some people away from others who didn't see the pandemic in the same way as a public health issue. So,
Well, did that affect you then, David? Are you seeing some of your friends kind of just like,
it's mostly extended family who
uh,
didn't see this as sort of a threat and thought that there was a bit of a kind of a conspiracy going on, almost, to fool people or to infect people, or to that there was something going on that was underhanded, and that it wasn't a legitimate health threat. It was something that had been manufactured by people who, for Lord knows what reason, but who wanted to take advantage of the idea of having this disease get this kind of visibility. And so it's a very weird narrative that I've heard, but it did get in the way of our connections to extended family.
Wow.
I have to say to that point, Candy, that COVID actually, in the pandemic, actually brought my family closer. We had more time to spend together without so many distractions. You know, sometimes work and outside activities with the kids, running them here and there, can really put a damper on your connection with your family because you're just so busy. It's just so busy. And with the pandemic, we had to slow down. We had to spend more time together. We weren't really able to do many outside things. And so for us, it was a blessing being able to play games and reconnect and just be together without having to rush and go places.
It's true.
Yes.
One other thought I have about being a senior citizen or aging through the years is that when you're raised with a brother or sisters, you're kind of automatically in a relationship with them, a blood relationship.
Yes.
But as the years and the decades go by, that kind of takes on more the aspect of either a person is or isn't a friend. So that in the case of my sister, we become good friends. But I believe there are many other people who like basically never speak to a brother or a sister just
Yeah.
because as two people, they don't get along at all. So, any
Well,
thought?
Well, Mike, that brings in a point then. What happens when you kind of do lose that friendship? Do
Mhm.
you kind of go after them and kind of get in there and say, forgive me, did I offend you? I mean, what do you do about that, Mike?
Well, you could certainly try with any failed friendship or failed sibling. But if you try and it fails 2 or 3 times, well, then
Yes.
you just kind of let them go
Yeah.
because it's just
Oh,
unpleasant being with them.
You know,
Yeah.
it's something too. Go
Yeah.
ahead, David.
I'll just say in the end, there's two things that always have to be there. One is both people have to be motivated to want to
Mhm.
make things better. And
true.
second, they both have to have the skills to make that happen. And some people don't know how to do that because
Yes.
conflict management is just not something they're accustomed to doing. And so sometimes we do have to let go if people on the other person doesn't have one of those two criteria, because there are limits to what communication can do. I hate to say that as someone
Yes.
who's communication skilled, but it's often finding those people who you can connect with. And
Mhm.
friends and family is an interesting concept because really since our daughter was adopted, was born in South Korea, we went through pre-adoptive counseling with 4 other families, and we developed a connection to them starting way back in the late 1980s. And we are still connected. We still do things periodically. We used to do them every month and then once every few months, and now maybe once a year. But we have adoption group things that we do. And those people functionally are more like a family than some other people who are in my family. And so you find family where you can get it, and you find friends where you can get it. And there's a very blurry line between those two things. But as far as I'm concerned, our adoption group is very definitely part of our family.
Yes. And, you know, on that topic, Michael, when you talked about, you know, your sister, you being friends now, sometimes, you know, as you evolve and you grow into who you're becoming, friends come and go because your interests change, you know, your lifestyle changes. And as a born again believer, the things that I believe, sometimes the friends that I had as a younger woman, they didn't evolve the way I evolved. And so I'm no longer friends with them based on that. And so what I appreciate about being a good communicator, as David spoke to, it it is a blessing that you can talk and say, hey, this is what I need, this is how I feel. And hopefully you love me enough that, you know, you will align with some of my views and values. And I can be friends with you even if we don't see everything eye to eye. And so that's a wonderful thing about friendship is we don't have to agree on everything. However, we should be able to coexist and have conflict management in relationship.
Well, that's definitely true. That's something I've noticed that there are, there's the old saying, don't talk about either politics or religion at the dinner table.
Right.
And when you learn that you have differences in those ways, but are able to retain the
Mhm.
friendship, well, that is the true measure of a friendship.
Yes.
It's a human interaction, so.
Well, my dad always used to say, agree to disagree.
Uh-huh.
So what you said, Mike, is agree to disagree. I won't talk about politics, religion. Agree to disagree.
That's right.
Mhm,
That's right. And then don't become disagreeable, right?
mhm.
Because, I could disagree with you and then become disagreeable, and then our relationship has ended because I can't accept that you don't agree what I'd agree with. And
Mhm.
so I think that's the key. Don't become disagreeable.
Well, there's a place for many different types of friendships, but one of the things that motivates people to be in friendships to begin with is confirmation of reality, that someone sees the world the same way you do. And so, with respect to politics and religion, if you've got people who don't see those things your way, you may have to put some boundaries around that relationship and make it less a central relationship in your life. And often the people who you're really attracted to are the ones who see the world the way you do. And there's a good side and probably a bad side to that, of just seeking out the people who see things the way you do. But we have a need to have somebody see the world our way. And it's very jarring when again, with some of the extended family, to realize how differently they see the very same thing that I'm looking at. And they're 180 degrees apart from where I am. And,
Yes.
and it's almost mind-boggling how we can begin to work through that. And I think in reality, what we've done is just put some limitations. We don't see each other as often. We stay away from certain topics. We're more kind of polite in a distant kind of way. And we take what we can get from that relationship. But there are limits to what we can do, because once you really start having candid discussions with them, it gets pretty scary, frankly.
Very true.
Yeah, I was going to mention, out of COVID, I gained an intimate group of new friends. A poetry group that started during COVID, was meant only to last through COVID, but that group of ladies has continued on, and even begun visiting each other at our homes. It's not just Zoom meetings and down to business any longer. It became a group of friendships that is valued by everyone, and that was out of the blue and not expected and not planned.
What a blessing.
Mhm.
Yes.
What a
Wow.
blessing.
Yeah,
Friendship.
I wonder
Go
if
ahead.
I could toss in one little factoid I just wanted to throw into the show today. And that again has to do with my sister and I having little in common when we were growing up. And I figured that when I was 6 and she was 12, she was twice my age. These days, she's about 8% older than me, not 100%. So we have much more in common because of our age than we did when we were growing up. So
Yes.
mention that.
Yeah.
Evolution of friendship. Yes.
Even befriending my 7th grade social studies teacher, at the time, if I'd done this right after graduating from high school, he would have seemed like almost like the senior citizen, although he's not. But now I'm 73 and he's 94, and hey, sort of in the
Oh.
same ballpark, more or less. And so it's got to be weird for him to have a 73-year-old former student, but it's just as weird for me to have a 94-year-old ex-teacher. But we can kind of get past all that, because so much time has transpired that we really are on the same plane. I certainly would not call him Mr. anymore, because Mr. was something you said to somebody who was 10 or 12 years older than
So
you.
he's still alive.
He's still alive. Had breakfast with him a couple months.
Wow.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Dave, haven't you also maintained a relationship with one of our teachers who was, perhaps 7 or 8 years, maybe 5 years older than us, Roger?
Yes.
But who you now continue to correspond with? And
Yeah. Roger was our social studies teacher in high school. He
Mhm.
left teaching, went into the Navy, wound up moving to California. He now lives in Rockland, California, and he comes here occasionally, maybe every 7 or 8 years, because he grew up in Matamidi. And I'll see him then, and we correspond fairly often and have some really common interests. And so that's been sort of nice too, to have somebody who goes back to 1968, who was a friend of yours.
And David and Michael, haven't you two grown up since young adulthood as friends and maintained all these years?
Well,
Mike, say what you want on that, Mike.
it all started in September of 1962 when we sat down next to each other in shop class in 7th grade. And,
Wow,
we've been talking and doing things together ever since. So
Yeah.
what a blessing.
I mean, it's gone through lots of phases, but Mike has always been there. And we were debate partners in high school. And part of his college, I went to Macalester, he went to the U of M, but we stayed in touch then. And through all the ups and downs of things, we've always kind of had some connection, either of various sorts. Most lately it's been golf that we play periodically. And it's a meaningful thing to have people who go back that far. I mean, I don't take that for granted. And it's a special thing that's precious to me anyway.
Mhm.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, it
And I
is.
love when you can be friends with your family members. And
Mm.
I think that can start with your parents bringing you in, because my sister that passed away, my mom would always put me in the bed with her. She's 15 years older than me. So when my mom would go in town, 'cause we lived in a small town in Lindstrom, and mom wanted to go to St. Paul. So she'd put me in the bed with my older 15-year-old sister. And her and I got closer and closer, as we got older. So you can even become friends with your family members.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And we're down to our final minute now. So if you have any final thoughts, but I'll just say I'm happy that our kids are in their 30s because they at least got to know me as a real person. And
There
so
you
we're
go.
friends and not just parent and child. And I really value that for us to get to know each other at that point. Any other thoughts in our last minute here?
One quick, fast thought is picking up on what Candy alluded to earlier in the program. If there is a rift between a family member and the friend, do what you can, if you can, to build or rebuild or repair that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just wind up regretting that. And part of getting older is not having too many regrets. And I think that's one thing people do regret.
There you go. There you go. What do they say? The graveyard is full of regrets.
That's right. Well, I regret to say that we are out of time for today, but it was a delightful discussion. Thank you all for your contributions. And so good luck to all of you with friends and family. And with that, we'll say we'll join you next time on another episode of Generation.